One of the things dividing us right now are these arguments over wokeness, for lack of a better word, and they're kind of conflicting data points. I mean, even right now, I saw earlier today, Bud Light it lost 10% of its earnings after the controversy over a transgender influencer who was advertising for them. Barbie, the movie, on the other hand, which was slammed by sort of the right, $1 billion.
Right.
Is the wokeness war, is it exaggerated? Do we really have those differences between us, or is this just another kind of conflict entrepreneur mechanism?
I think we're, as many people have said, past peak wokeness. And I measure that just by the ability of what can be said. And I do think there was a period in 2020 where at a lot of institutions where I work, I mean, I'm not an expert on a lot, but I work at the New York Times, the Atlantic, Yale, and PBS. I'm an expert at progressive coastal institutions. And so I think people were feeling, what can you say? And then I think what happened over the last 2 or 3 years, a lot of the people who are liberal, and I mean that in the classical sense, who believe in free speech, they said, no, we're not. That's not the way this works. We're a journalism institution. We're an academic institute. Truth is paramount. And so free discussion is paramount. And they began to say more, and therefore the bounds of what was sayable has expanded. There are still some ideas out there that I think are still as malicious as ever. One of them is what they call standpoint epistemology, that you can only know what so-and-so, I have my own personal experience, you can't know my experience, you have to be in my standpoint. And that's, of course, somewhat true. We can't know each other whole, but I believe like a black writer can write a white character and a white author can write a black character. I think, Othello's pretty good. And so that idea is still out there. There's still a sense of racial essentialism out there, that what you are is your white identity, your black identity, your brown identity, that these really determine most about you, and that the categories we use, the group categories, are essentially real as opposed to just social constructs. And I think that we're living awash in generalizations about people because of this. So I think some of the ideas that are coming out, and I would recommend a book that's coming out in September by a guy named Yasha Monk, and it's about the intellectual substructure of wokeness. It's like we all have a vague sense of what it is, but what ideas are really beneath it? And one of the ideas, which I think is still very prevalent in our educational system, is that American society is divided into oppressor and oppressed classes. And when I meet you, my question for you is, are you an oppressor or oppressed? And that's just too simplistic. That's just a permanent warfare category that I think is overly simplistic to a group of human beings who are imperfect and fallen, but most of them trying their best to care for each other.
A lot of the tribal debate right now has to do with gender. Do you think that these arguments, the Bud Light controversy, for instance, do you think that's going to kind of settle out socially? I don't mean theologically, but socially, the way that, say, same-sex marriage did? Or is this going to remain a key divide in American life?
I think it'll settle. I think it's become, for a lot of people, it was just the cutting-edge civil rights issue. And it's just weird. We went from, how many people called themselves transgender 5 years ago. Now, if you look at Harvard, Yale, you're getting up to 40% of the students suddenly calling themselves transgender. And while at Penn it's 12, like, why is it 37 at Harvard, at Penn 12? But in the country, frankly, and I may be more left on transgender issues. I'm willing to tolerate, I'm willing to celebrate people, whatever they want to be called, fine. I'm fine with that. But it feels to me that there's just a fad almost, especially among the young, to adopt this label. And then if you go, like I just spent 2 weeks in Europe, not much of an issue there. And you go to most parts of the country outside of Twitter and social media, some people are men, some are women, some are gay, some are straight, but it's not like 40% of the people have their rights being infringed because they're transgender. It's something we can learn to deal with, but it's just not a huge thing. I was out in West Virginia this past weekend and speaking to a local guy there. He said if you go to the beer aisle in his grocery store, all the beers are sold out except for a bunch of blue cases for the Bud Light. And he said some of the bars around there have begun to serve what they call mystery beer. and it's only like 50 cents on the dollar, and so they don't want to get involved in. They don't want to sell Bud Light over the counter, but they're doing it under the counter as mystery beer. It just the culture war stuff. I think is just an excuse to have a war some of the time.